Are you thinking of selling your home in Calgary? Well, if so, in this video, I'll break down all of the costs associated with selling a property, from realtor fees, legal fees, and closing costs, to help you get a full understanding of the process, to help you budget accordingly, and just so there are no surprises. My name is Ryan Gillard at Real Broker, your Calgary Realtor. And if you are thinking of selling your home, this is a must-watch video. Let's get into it. And before we get right into it, if you are thinking of buying or selling and could use some help, feel free to reach out, call, text, email, or comment. I've got loads of free resources in the pinned comment or the written description, so feel free to check them out. And when I started planning for this video, I thought I was just going to make it from the seller's perspective, but I will add some buyer expenses in here as well. I think it just makes sense. All right, let's get rolling. And first things first, I will cover the legal fees. Now, this applies to both buyers and sellers, and the legal fee is the fee your lawyer charges to go over all the paperwork, give you advice. Sometimes they're actually negotiating on your behalf as well, to sign paperwork with you. So all of the generic lawyer type things will be covered under the legal fees. And I'll just briefly summarize the legal process. And the first step here for most lawyers, I imagine, is to do a title search and a tax search. There can be issues on the title like writs by the CRA, caveats, encroachments, and stuff like that. So they'll usually do a tax and title search first just to see what they're up against. Every transaction is different and some of them are quite complicated. So this will be the first step for most lawyers. And the next step is that the lawyer will draft up all of the paperwork that's necessary to complete the transaction, and they will deal with land titles and the lenders as well to make sure the money comes from the buyer's lawyer to the seller's lawyer for the possession date. And on possession day, what happens is that the buyer's lawyer will send the funds to the seller's lawyer, and once the seller has the funds, keys are then releasable, and the buyer's agent will do a walkthrough with the buyer, and the sale is complete. Now, that's just a very basic summary of the legal process. There's much more to it that happens behind the scenes with the lawyers, but that's just a good brief summary. And every law firm is different. Some people charge a flat fee for all of their services. Some will charge legal fees, disbursements, and other expenses. So if this is very important to you, you should probably check around to see how they structure their fees. But a good rule of thumb that I've used for years and years is that it might cost anywhere between $1,500 to $2,000 all in for most transactions in Calgary. The more expensive the transaction, the higher the legal fees. But for your typical price properties, I would say anywhere between $1,500 to $2,000 should be a reasonable estimate. And next up, let's talk about disbursements. Now, again, sometimes your legal fees can be all in one lump sum payment, and sometimes they're charged separately. And disbursements are things that the law firm pays out on behalf of their client. This can include registrations with land titles for things like new mortgages, discharges, and title transfers. Other fees can include encroachment agreements, additional titles for storage and parking, relaxation permits, title insurance, estoppel certificates, interest fees for late closing, courier charges, and office expenses. Next up are adjustments. These are just financial calculations made to ensure buyer and seller pay their fair share of costs related to the property. This can happen because possession can be at a time when expenses or revenues overlap, and there needs to be an adjustment. So some common adjustments are property taxes. So let's say, for example, if the seller paid the full year's taxes of $3,000 and possession occurred halfway through the year, the buyer would reimburse the seller $1,500. Same idea for condo fees. Say the condo fee is $400 a month and possession happened midway through the month. And so there would be an adjustment of $200 the buyer would reimburse to the seller. Now, property taxes and condo fees, those are probably the most common adjustments, but there could be others. There could be rental income, for example, depending on how the contract is structured and when possession happens. That might be another option for adjustments. So there are a few things like this that could pop up depending on how complex the transaction is. And this one is for the buyers out there, and that's title insurance. So title insurance is an insurance policy that protects home buyers and lenders from certain losses or legal expenses related to the title of the property. Typically a one-time payment around $250 to $400 and paid at closing, and can cover issues that might come up from title defects, property survey problems, and fraud. This applies even if the defects existed before you purchased the property. Some common issues: it protects against financial loss from undisclosed claims or liens that could affect ownership rights, like writs or caveats on title and stuff like that. There could be errors in public records like surveys or title documents. These can be common. I actually had one of these last year where the condo plan had the wrong unit numbers on it and the owners had no idea. It was like a sixplex and they were all out to lunch on the unit numbers, and it took us like half a year to get this resolved. So this can be an issue that title insurance can help protect you against, and all the costs associated with this are paid out by the insurer. Other issues, it can cover legal costs for encroachments related to fences and garages and help resolve the issues and help fight against fraud and forgery. So there are issues like this that title insurance does help pay for, and it only costs between $250 to $400 on average. It's a one-time fee, and I think if I was buying a property, I would probably do this. It does protect you from issues that could pop up down the road. And next up is real estate commissions. This can be the biggest expense for sellers. And by law in Alberta, commission is negotiable. There's no set rule that we have in Alberta. But the most common structure that you would see in Calgary, from my experience, and I've been licensed since 2012, is that it's 7% of the first 100,000 and 3% of the balance. So it's kind of a weird structure, but on a $400,000 property, that works out to $16,000. So that is a lot of money, but it doesn't all go to the listing agent. There's usually a listing agent and a buyer's agent, and it's broken into two. So $8,000 per side. And even then, the $8,000 is not all the agent's money. There's typically a brokerage split. Then you have to factor in taxes and office expenses and stuff like that. So it is a lot of money, but it does get broken down. And that would be a very simple, very common structure that I would say you'd see in Calgary. And there's also GST on commissions, not on the sale price unless it's a brand new property. So on $16,000, there would be $800 of GST. And again, it'd be $400 to the listing agent, $400 to the buyer's agent. And that's just an easy rundown of real estate commissions. Again, there's no set rule. They're always different. It could be a flat 5%, who knows? It's always up to whatever the seller and the listing agent agree to. And the last two costs I'll go over here are more so for buyers. I find they tend to forget about these expenses going through the process. And the first one is home insurance. And I'd say in Calgary for a typical property, it might be about $200 per month. Again, it's the more expensive the property, the higher the insurance, or other factors could be at play. Is it in the flood zone and stuff like that? But I'd say $200 a month for home insurance is probably realistic. And the last expense I'll cover here would be utilities. And so this is for electricity, natural gas, water, sewer, recycling, stuff like that. And I would say for your typical family home in Calgary, it could range anywhere from like $350 to say $600. This is a cost that might surprise a lot of buyers as well. Utilities are expensive in Alberta. And lastly would be our moving expenses. This depends on where you're moving from, how much furniture you have. But that's a good quick rundown of most of the expenses that you'll come across when you're selling a property, and I've added a few in here for the buyer as well. Now, if you are thinking about making a move, I'd love to help you out. Give me a call, shoot me a text, send me an email. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.